Welcome to Drams and Dragons, the podcast about fantasy, whiskey, and the power of friendship.
And occasionally grannies.
And occasionally grannies. My name's Gus Berger. With me is Dustin Van Horn, as always. How are
I
you doing,
guess
man?
it's been a long day on a Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely was not late for our podcast. That I want the listeners to know that. Very on top of things.
Rough Monday, I think, for everybody.
Yeah.
Today we're gonna do a topic instead of a specific book. We're kind of gonna talk about getting our kids into fantasy. Dustin and I have had some different experiences with that, and it'll be kind of interesting to compare a little bit. And then also, I kind of want to talk about fantasy recommendations for kids. I have some. I've got a list, most of which are fairly popular, probably, but some of which might not be. So before we talk about it, it is totally appropriate for an episode about kids. Is we're still going to drink some whiskey. Today we're going to be drinking the Talisker Port Ruighe. And
I'm excited about this one.
How did you think this was pronounced before?
I would have said Port Ruighe.
Yeah.
Ruighe.
Yeah, Port Ruighe.
Oh,
Port Ruighe.
Come on, Scottish people. Yeah.
I would have looked at this like if I was speaking English, American English, or even English, and I would have been like Port Ruighe. There's a GH in it, and that's always confusing.
Yeah, Ruighe.
Yeah,
fun.
But it's just Re. Yeah, it's not even Ru. It's just Re.
Okay, so really it's the R at the beginning and the E at the end, and just forget all the letters in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, You could maybe make a justification that Re comes out of like Rui or something. I mean, there's a GH is silent. I can see that. Right. So then it's just like a bunch of vowels.
Yeah.
And I guess somebody could be like, fuck it. It's Re. Talisker Port Ruighe. So this is the next one in that Drinks by the Dram set that we got, the Islands and Highlands. And I'm looking forward to this. I've never had any Talisker. You're a big fan of some of their stuff.
Yeah, I like the Talisker Storm a lot.
Yeah.
I haven't had anything bad from Talisker. This would be a first if it was bad. But
yeah, I don't expect this to be bad.
Me neither.
I've heard very good things about Talisker. So
we got a 45.8% alcohol by volume. So that's what, about 92 proof.
All
right. Nice pour here.
Right.
Okay, I think I detect some peaty smoke. Oh, thank goodness.
Color's pretty amber.
Yeah.
It's a very nice color.
I would bet money they dye it because they do with the Storm.
Yeah. I would as well. I think it's got that amber color that you don't find usually in whiskeys with no age statement.
Yeah.
So
probably dyed. It's got some nice legs on it, very oily.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, when you give it a swirl, it kind of stays that way. You don't see the legs, and then they slowly appear.
Yeah.
Very, very pleasing to the eye.
Yeah, and they don't disappear quickly.
Oh, it smells wonderful.
It does.
Yeah, it smells like a Talisker.
Yeah, the peat is very nice. It's very maritime. Also got some apple on my first whiff.
Good old apple.
And fairly fresh apple, I would say.
Yeah, not stewed or anything. Sorry, that last one kind of left an impression. I'm already really enjoying this. Yeah, I get some sort of spice. I get vanilla for sure.
I'm getting some cinnamon.
Yeah, cinnamon. Man, you can't beat that. Cinnamon, vanilla, peat, apple.
Real nice. I do detect some sort of iodine notes. Subtle, not like a Lefroy or something. Subtle iodine. Okay,
bear with me here. Think soap, like a bit of like if you've ever used like real soap made by a person. That's so stupid. Regular old soap made by like an amateur person. There's a bit of a like when you first go in for it. I get a little bit of that on the nose.
Mm.
I don't know what to call it except for soapy, but in a good way. I'm doing the old warm glass thing here, hoping I can get some extra stuff out of it.
You know what? I am now detecting the soapy smell. It's like a waxy smell, like warm
Ah,
wax, warm
yeah.
wax. Yeah, I'm getting that now. Sometimes you just need to let it warm up a little and open up a little, breathe, and
Mm-hmm.
more smells start coming out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. Now that it's there, it's like really present.
Right?
It's really
That's
nice. It's actually really nice too. It's like but it's waxy to me. Sort of
yeah.
like we're making candles or something, you know.
Yeah, I can yeah. Yeah, I think that's better than soapy. I'm ready to taste this, Gus. I'm
Yeah.
my taste
Same.
buds are they're jealous. Wow, it's a very long taste. It
It's
changes.
it's smooth, it's complex, it's
Wow.
long. I get pear more than apple on the taste. Like I got
Mm.
very fresh apple on the nose, very fresh sort of or very sort of richer pear flavor in addition to apple on the taste. It's quite peaty, it's quite smoky.
Mm-hmm.
It would be in good company with any of the sort of Isla,
Mm-hmm.
peated whiskeys. It would be in very good company there.
So this one's fun. This might even be the storm or be similar to the Talisker storm because it has the same process. You drink it, you get a strong hit, it chills for a second, and then it like comes alive again at the back of your palate. And then there's a third step when it goes, you feel like your esophagus kind of warming up. Right? Every sip is like that. And that's their whole thing with Talisker. They have like experience drinks, and that's why I like the Storm so much. And this is very similar.
Yeah.
Like,
Now this one is finished in
oh,
port casks.
interesting.
Yeah. There's a kind of sweetness and a kind of sweet flavor I'm getting here.
Mm-hmm.
It's mm, almost more like chocolate.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like doing the port thing. Yeah, it's like a
Mm-hmm.
very tanniny chocolate.
Yes, very tanniny. Yes, that's a good word.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
A lot of oak. There's a flavor in there that I'm having trouble. That's I wouldn't necessarily quite describe it as earthy. It's at the front.
Hmm. Let me see if I can. This is a challenge to taste because of how long the taste is.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you try to focus on the front, it's
You're at the
moving on.
back. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's engaging this the whole way down.
but there's a flavor at the front that
Mm,
comes with sort of the sweetness. There's a lot going on. This is a very complex, whiskey here.
yeah, yeah, it really is. Okay, I had it. Acidic is the word that's coming to my mind when I'm trying to place that flavor because you get the port,
Hmm.
chocolatey, tan, anything, and then there's like an acidic nature to it, and it's a sweet acidic. So I'm wondering if it's citrusy is what maybe we're
If it
tasting.
if it is citrus, I would say it's more orange than lemon or something. Um, but I don't know if it's citrus. There's an earthier.
Mm,
I don't want to call it. I don't want to call it metallic, but it's in that direction,
interesting.
and it's right towards the front. It's like right there's like something I'm missing the name for, kind of like right at the front. But I think if we were tasting wine, somebody might say, "Well, it's minerality," or
Ah,
something,
yes, yeah.
just to throw a label on it. It's just I don't know. It's for me, it's sort of indefinable at the front. Maybe the card will tell us what it is,
Yeah,
what they call it or something. But
yeah. There's a character to it that yeah, it could be minerally. And yeah, a way that I like to describe it is like with certain ones, it's like licking driftwood almost. Like it's what you would imagine it would be like to put your tongue on a piece of driftwood, like salty, briny, a little woody. I think so
mhm.
this one maybe it's like putting your tongue on a like a gun barrel or something, and not in a weird way.
Now,
Like what was that cannon?
yeah.
Cannon.
Okay, now I'm moving on to the finish here because I'm noticing something that I noticed on a couple of tastings ago.
All right, let's hear it.
Cigars. I'm getting that again on the back end, like on the finish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting cigars again.
You talking the mouth feel or the kind of
The sort
tobacco-y
of
kind
back of
of?
the throat tobacco-y cigar flavor.
Yeah.
Getting that
I got
on
it
the
now
back,
too.
like way at the back, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah, I got that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. But it comes across as kind of cocoa-y to me too. Like
Hmm.
the
Well,
chocolate, it's
it's
not as tanniny. It's more.
it's chocolate and cigars.
Ooh, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good combo. It's also got that real pleasant mouth feel where your taste buds are feeling a little assaulted, and it has that salinity to it. So the mouth feels really pleasant in the finish. No bitterness.
It's a nice balance
Yeah.
between sweet and savory or sweet and salty flavors, you know?
Mm-hmm. Quite pleasant.
What shape would you give it?
Yeah. Oh, it'd almost be so. The initial one was very pointed, like a spade,
Hmm.
and then it kind of spreads out, and there's like a couple smaller spikes. Like this, the finish, it's smooth. Yeah, that's what's cool about this. I wouldn't give it one specific shape. It changes at every point in the palate. I'd give it three distinct phases, though: the front, middle, and the end of the
Hmm.
taste. And every time I've tasted it, I've had that happen. So, and that's very unique with whiskeys. I don't get that a lot.
It's very nice.
Oh yeah, that's good. Well, shoot, should we reveal the tasting notes here? See how we did?
Absolutely. Nose.
Yeah, we don't look at these before.
After a wave of initial sea spray, the nose
Ooh.
becomes more complex, like with Crayola crayons,
What?
orange pith, and a touch of white chocolate. Demerara and even sticking plaster emerge briefly, along with plummy. What is that even? Is it umeshu?
Umeshu. You've had umeshu, right? It's like Japanese plum wine. It's
Oh,
very
is that the
sweet.
stuff? Wait, is that the stuff you guys got for us that one time?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have had it
Yeah.
once. That stuff was good. Umeshu notes.
Whoa. Okay, I can get that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like sweet plummy. Oh wow. And I think the crayon thing is describing what we had as the waxy,
Yeah,
soapy kind of thing. Yeah.
definitely.
What Crayola crowns? Huh? I don't know. That's a little specific.
So you're getting some orange and chocolate in there. Crayola
Ah,
crayons. Yeah.
what about Demerara? Do you know what that is?
It's like a kind of raw sugar.
Cool. I like whoever this taster is. I think they're the funny one who does some interesting flavor ones. I'll do the palette here. Uh, Initial characteristic Talisker brine, once again, but much sweeter than usual.
Mm-hmm.
Thick and mouth coating like the storm, with chili spelled oddly, Chilli, maybe chili, and a little chocolate orange. Ah,
Ooh.
you nailed the orange there. Increasingly smoky, much smokier than the nose suggests.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I can see all
Oh,
of that.
interesting.
The finish, milk chocolate,
Eh,
becomes cocoa and oak with mocha notes and the faintest hint of that orange pith once again.
the hell's orange pith?
That's the white, bitter part of the orange peel.
Nice. Not getting very pithy on the palate here, but
No, I can see it. I mean, it's sort of I can see all of this. There are some things I think we saw that they didn't. Some things they saw. Yeah, some things they saw that are tasted that we didn't necessarily. But actually, as far as these cards go and what we got from them, it's not that far off.
yeah.
And when they said chili, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I can get that on the palate. I can get that. I can see that.
I don't know. I gotta Google that. Maybe the way they spelled it is something different because I'm not getting chili peppers or like Texas chili.
It's just a misspelling.
You never know on these cards. That could be something special.
Yeah,
You know?
what I'm getting isn't the spice of chili,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like the flavor of chili. I
Okay.
think there was an earthiness that I was like
Maybe that's what
searching
it
for,
was.
and I think that's what this is.
Cool. Well, look at that. That was a fun taste right there.
Yeah, it was, and it's quite tasty. I think I do recommend this.
Hell yeah.
The
Look at the
Talisker
price.
Port Ruighe, and I think the price is not terrible at all. I think it's a little hard to find.
Yeah, I'm showing 62.42 if you buy it from the Masters of Malt website.
Yeah, I'm seeing it in stock on the Whiskey Exchange for basically 57 British pounds.
Okay.
Um, so actually a very reasonable price. Like that is a very reasonably priced whiskey for
Mhm.
the complexity and how enjoyable it was. Like, I would be happy with this in my selection
Oh
on my
yeah.
shelf. Very tasty. It's got a lot going on. Everything that's going on in it is pleasant. There weren't any notes or anything that I found that I disliked. Everything
Hmm.
was great. It was well balanced. It was a very solid dram. I liked it. I recommend it, and I would also say I would personally go try other Taliskers based on this tasting.
Hmm.
And it's really nice.
I agree with all that. Yeah, it's such a great brand. This one I just like on so many levels. This is the second. I've had three types. I've had kind of the regular 10 year. I've had their storm, and this is the third one I've had. Every single one of them has this kind of character to it, and they all have a different experience to it. And yeah, I think they're probably one of my favorite distillers. They have yet to disappoint. And at the price point they're at, it's a no brainer. This is a good
Yeah,
whiskey.
absolutely. It's a good whiskey for a very reasonable price, which is surprising from Diageo.
Yeah, good old Diageo.
Diageo's, one of those big conglomerates that owns. They tend to buy up, good brands, good whiskeys. Like they make a good whiskey, but they tend to jack the prices up when they buy
Yeah,
something. Um, and I mean, like that's a reasonable
yeah, it
price for
really is.
this. It's a very fair price
Yeah.
for this.
Oh man, yeah, so good. I'm gonna treasure this and sip this. So, shall we move on?
Yeah, man. Let's move on to the subject, the topic, getting our kids into fantasy. And what do we recommend? What do we recommend in terms of how to do that? What do we recommend in terms of like what books, some recommendations on what to read? And I'll tell you the first part of this for me, my first instinct is to be kind of like, well, it's just automatic. It just happens. And I say that because my kids love fantasy, like
Mhm.
right out of the gate. I've read a number of fantasy books to them. They have enjoyed a lot of it. They haven't enjoyed everything. Some of it's been above their head, but a fair number of these books that I've read to them have been like are beloved. They love them.
Yeah.
And so I want to just be like, wow, it's automatic. All kids like fantasy, right? And I
Mhm.
and I think, there's and obviously that's not true, right? Like but
Right.
but I sort of have this bias towards that because I think that a lot of the world just sort of sees fantasy as being almost like fundamentally a kid's genre.
Mm.
For a long time it was viewed that way almost exclusively. It was sort of like you had, the kids books, you had C.S. Lewis, and you had, or even before that, you had the Wizard of Oz, and you had like, The Hobbit was Tolkien's first book that he got published, and like these were all children's books. And there's a whole bunch. I mean, I could go back in time and back in history. I mean, like the Brothers Grimm, like the early, like the fairy tales that
Yeah.
got published. I mean, those were not originally children's tales necessarily, but they were adapted for children's reading. A lot of the world has seen this as sort of this juvenile, sort of pastime, this thing that kids are into and then they grow out of, right? And it's
Right.
and it's really in our lifetime, Dustin, that it has even become a thing for adults to be into, and has
Hmm.
become this mature, genre of literature.
Yeah.
Um, and so for me, I'm like sort of maybe I'm biased towards that, and then also my kids happen to really like fantasy.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm curious from with your kid, what have you found?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you went into the background because I think the background plays into it a little bit. When you have a kid, or really when you have any interest, it always comes up against stigma, what the culture thinks is okay, this and that. Human beings kind of, we're imaginative creatures. Kids tend to play, they tend to pretend. Um, I think in a lot of ways, human beings are primed for fantasy, but we also have this thing in our culture, and our meaning kind of just general old American culture with all of its mixing pot, melting pot stuff, is things need to have a purpose. And I think fantasy fell into this thing for a while where people said, well, you're not learning anything. You're not reading literature. You're not growing your brain. You're just wasting it away. And only recently, like in our lifetimes, like you said, if people put some really good research in and had some good data behind like the benefits of fantasy, and people finally started taking fantasy seriously and saying, yes, this is literature. It's art. It's worth um, putting your time into. And so I took that same philosophy with my kid, because the world of having a kid is rife with that. From the moment they're born, they're like, oh yeah, you got to be building that brain. If it's not doing something to grow them, you're doing it wrong.
Hmm.
And I think oftentimes we miss the simplicity of like letting them play, because there's all these neural pathways that get opened up when they just move their bodies or
Hmm.
when they pretend. And so I've tried to take kind of a natural course with my kid, and our big one is storytelling. It's been really difficult to get her into like hard fiction, like I would read, like fantasy stuff. And there's some stuff that we'll talk about later that's more kind of kid focused or kid appropriate even. But I had all these great ideas. I'm like, all right, we're going to read his Dark Materials. We'll probably do some Harry Potter down the way. We'll do Earthsea. And whenever we'd read them, or we try to, she's just too young for so many of the things. We end up spending more time asking like, what's this? What's this fairy creature doing there? Or like, why? I don't know. What's a sword? You know, like little things like that. So yeah, that's kind of been my my take on it. Is I start with storytelling, and basically I introduce straight up D&D to her through storytelling. Oh, we tell a series of stories called Bobo the Barbarian, and Ellie has a character, and we take turns telling stories to each other.
Nice.
Um, and it's growing the fantasy bug, I think,
Hmm.
without frustrating her with some of the more the subject matter. And we have other books we read to her, and even those have elements of fantasy in them. It's without going on too long. My other philosophy is fantasy is about putting your head inside of the other, like a person who's not you. It's a way of experiencing like a different life almost. And so every time your kid reads something that has like an animal, that
Hmm.
that's fantasy.
Yeah.
There's a fantasy element to that. So I don't know. That's kind of, I think, the broad strokes of my kind of approach to it. What's been your approach? I know you said you've had more success with just like straight up reading some fantasy,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah. So for us in our house, we read a lot. Like reading is a big deal. Like we try to read most evenings, before bed.
Mm-hmm.
And we started out, not with like the sort of, the Hobbit or without like Earthsea. Although we could talk about, I think I mentioned in the Earthsea
Oh
episode,
yeah,
like I tried my kids with that and it was just too advanced for them. And maybe
yeah,
someday we'll go back to it or they'll read it themselves because I loved that when I was sort of, older grade schooler.
yeah.
But there are some things that like I think really helped them get into it. And that is, fantasy is kind of everywhere
Mm.
in our culture, in our society. Like it's often in the sort of form of fairy tales. It's often in the form of just and an example is, you know, practically anything made by Disney, right?
Yeah.
I mean, fairy tales are a subgenre. Then they're potentially the oldest subgenre of fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the earliest fantasy books and novels and stories are fairy tales. I know some people try to separate them out and have some weird, you know, uh, sort of contortionist takes where they kind of like bend themselves and contort themselves to sort of exclude fairy tales from fantasy. But I really
Oh
think
yeah.
they are the oldest sort of genre of fantasy, um,
Mm-hmm.
and or at least one of the oldest. And
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
and I think so you find those a lot, and it's once somebody's into Frozen, once a little kid is into Frozen, it's a short step to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
But we know, and another thing is there are some fantasy like picture books that we got when they were pretty young.
Mm-hmm.
and they're still not too young for some of these quite. They're maybe, soon to grow out of them. Um, but there's a series of really adorable picture books. They're not like, I mean, there's words, but you know, they're children's books.
Mm-hmm.
There's this really adorable series by Alex Willen. Um, the first book in the series is Unicorns Are the Worst. And there's a whole series of these. So there's one that's Unicorns Are the Worst. There's one that's the dragons are the worst, and there's yetis are the worst.
Mm-hmm.
There's elves are the worst, and then there's another one that's coming out soon that's like mermaids are the worst. And at some point the word worst has lost all meaning, and I just there's
Yeah.
just so many of
Worst.
there's a whole series that's really really fun and entertaining. It's goofy, it's very silly. Stars this little goblin,
Mm-hmm.
and that was something that like I got the first book for the kids, and they were just like obsessed with it. They wanted it to be
Cool.
read every single night. And it's this little goblin who's like encountering these other people around him, or these other, fantasy beings, fantasy entities, creatures around him, and, not liking them kind of,
Mm-hmm.
and learning to like them and learning to accept them. But anyway, it's this really adorable little
Yeah.
series. So I think picture books, the visualization of a lot of sort of visual interaction, that format worked really well for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that we did early on was Dinotopia. Are you familiar with Dinotopia?
Oh yeah. Oh, that's old school.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gonna.
that came out when we were like in grade school, I think. Or
Yeah.
like
It's like 80s, late 80s, early 90s kind of
yeah, yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it Dinotopia, I remember when it came out, it was like huge. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember they even made like some crappy adaptation show of it, like back in the
Yes,
day. And like,
they did, didn't they?
yeah. But the books are still really cool. Uh, and man, my kids just, they were in like the middle of like a dinosaur phase. And I want to be clear, it is fantasy, right? Like it, I mean, I guess,
Yeah.
it's kind of, you know,
Or it's a young Earth primer. I don't know.
yeah, but it's still somewhere in that genre, but it's just like these sort of fantastical worlds that are built
Yeah.
right um in these beautifully illustrated
Mm-hmm.
books are a really cool
Well,
way.
dude.
I think kids are very visual, right?
Mhm.
Um yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And just for reference, we're talking about I guess our age ranges. I don't know. Mine's 6, and
Mhm.
yours are 7, right?
Mine
So yeah, we're
just
talking
mine
like
just turned 8. I
yeah.
don't
Wow.
know I
Jeez.
don't know how that happened.
Yeah,
It,
that's
yeah,
nuts.
it's crazy.
Ah,
Ugh.
woof. Um. Oh man. Yeah. Time goes so quick. So yeah, but it kind of changes every year. I think my kid, she leans definitely visual, more towards kinesthetic too. She likes to do the fantasy.
Mhm.
Like she's got acting genes in her or something. Like she wants to play the part, do the things. And I guess that's a really good point. Like it's important to kind of feel your kids out, see what it is that they respond to. Because yeah, I think my kid loves soundtracks to Disney movies.
Hmm.
And when she saw Frozen for the first time, not only was she shooting ice out of her hands at me and I would be frozen, whenever she wanted that to happen, she'd freeze us. But she was singing it constantly. She was stamping her foot down. Here I stand. She put her
Hmm.
foot down, and the for her, the auditory kind of acting it out thing really kind of took off, which was great for some things, but it made other things a challenge. And like sitting down and reading a book without pictures is a really big challenge for her at this stage, which I guess
Mhm.
is common, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
that's
not.
pretty common. my kids, the picture thing, like I started The Hobbit
Hmm.
without pictures. That
Hmm.
was a terrible idea. Like
Yeah.
we had to get the picture, like the illustrated version. And
Yeah,
even
there's a
that,
special edition,
yeah,
listeners. Yeah, it's
yeah, yeah.
green and it's got pictures and
And it doesn't
much
have,
better.
I will say it had just enough pictures for the
Hmm.
kids. Like it had barely enough pictures. like so like
Yeah.
they like there's
Could
some
have maybe used a few
stretches.
more.
Yeah, there's some stretches in the book where you're like, there's just not quite enough pictures, and you're like, the kids are getting kind of like, where's the next picture,
Yeah.
daddy? I want to see what's going on. They just like they can visualize it to some extent, but like it really helps them to have pictures.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, man. There's also, if you are gonna do Harry Potter, and I know that some people might be like, "Oh, J.K. Rowling, she's evil." But if you're not gonna, if you are gonna do Harry Potter, if you are, and I'm not gonna say you should or shouldn't, if you are, there's a very cool illustrated edition. This got like, I mean, it's got like pullouts, like paper pullouts, and it's got like full spread, you know, fold out pages with pictures on it.
Yeah.
That's
Get
awesome. It's
I get them
awesome.
from the library a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd buy them because they're like $50 for a book.
They're not that much if you get
I
them on
know.
like Amazon sale or on like
Oh yeah.
yeah, or from like Costco or something. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's ways to get them like $20, regular prices.
Yeah.
But not all of them are in that edition. Like they've been coming out slowly, like year
Hmm.
after year. But if you're just going to start out slow and do a couple, like it's a very, very cool way of doing it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that kind of brings us something I wanted to pick your brain about too was prose and language and even voices that you use. I know something I love to do. I love to use different voices for the characters. And we started reading The Hobbit recently, and probably the biggest problem with The Hobbit was just the language was 60 years out of date.
mhm.
They still use like queer, like he had a queer look on his face, which just so I found myself like translating. I'm like, my kid's not going to understand this.
It's old timey. Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Oh,
was like, so
absolutely.
what's been your experience with that? Like, how have you kind of adapted that stuff to be more accessible, or have you, or,
Yeah. I haven't really. And
mm.
if I read a word and the kids like look at me with like a blank look on their face, I'm like, do you know what that means? And they're like, usually like, and then I, explain what it means. And, uh, so it's
What
just sort
about,
of being
yeah,
attentive, right?
yeah.
And, but also choice, like book choice helps a lot. Like
Hmm.
Earthsea, Earthsea was not working. Like it was billed as a kid's book. It's still like most places sold as a kid's book. And I'm like, yeah, like really older kids maybe, but like,
Yeah, maybe like 10 to 14 kind of.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like you'd have to be like for like a littler kid, like you have to be some sophisticated ass kids, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, Earthsea is like, I could see why somebody would say it's a kid's book because in terms of the subject matter, just in
Hmm.
terms of the subject matter, it's not that bad. In terms of the prose that Ursula K. Le Guin used, like it's quite advanced, like
Hmm.
for a children's book. I mean, I've read young adult books that are much more like, simple and much
Yeah.
simpler. And yeah, it's,
Yeah.
it's a, yeah, it's a different sort of world, different expectation, but also maybe just like, again, that bias towards fantasy, like this idea that sort of this old fashioned idea about whether fantasy should be for grown-ups or kids or whatever when it was published, right? And so
Yeah.
it got this label slapped on it, but the
Yeah.
label is kind of bullshit. So I just
Yeah.
be a little careful when you're selecting for your kid, like
Hmm.
what they're gonna, you know, be into or able to read or able to understand.
Yeah. I guess we have to be careful what uh, we censor. sometimes because the kids are little sponges too, and there's some
Hmm.
ways like there's just been changes in parenting, like what we know about children and what they need at the age and stuff. And there's phrases and like either sometimes the way the characters talk to each other. When you're a parent, you're like, I don't want my kid talking to other kids like that because they will pick it up.
Hmm.
And they'll go, oh, I can call somebody an idiot or a fool,
Hmm.
or and something. It seems kind of funny, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think that's the only sort of censorship we end up doing. I'll occasionally try to make it more understandable. Um, there's been books that the old fashioned thing comes up a lot, actually, especially when they're just talking to and about other people. Like, if you ever watched an episode of Peanuts,
Hmm.
beloved, like recently, it's
I
doesn't
was
always,
I don't watch it a lot. I honestly I've never really been a big fan of it.
yeah,
Like it's not something I'm gonna go like I haven't seen an episode of that in like
yeah.
in a long time.
You should, yeah, you should. In fact, anybody who, if you haven't seen it in a few years, go check it out. It's really, it's kind of stunning how different like the standards of the age are and stuff, and how different things are. But just the way the kids interact with each other
Mhm.
is just something like I don't want my kid around that.
Yeah.
This is Peanuts. Like it's like it's a thing. But yeah, I guess that would be the only pearl clutching I have about some of the books. And you mentioned Harry Potter and all the stuff, and I guess that stuff is subjective. It's wherever you decide to put your line with your kids. Oh, where was I going with that? Um, there's a lot of stuff that's like there's so much out there, and even just you had a couple. Dinotopia's classic. I want to check out the one with the goblin. Um,
Mhm.
we've been kind of goes along that theme that we were talking of. Like, I think of it almost as kind of like tricking the kid into liking fantasy by introducing fantasy elements to them with like unicorns and rain,
Mhm.
things like that. Because we have one called The Princess in Black, and I'm not always the writing isn't always fun to go through, but it's got these princesses and they pretend to be superheroes and they fight monsters that are invading the kingdom. And my kid just eats them up. She loves them,
Yeah.
and they have cool themes and stuff. But yeah, I think it's all about that, man. It's all about like if you have this interest in fantasy. I think all the people writing now are people like us who wanted to get their kids into it, and like we can't just throw Tolkien at them right away because the hobbits, even the Hobbit is you need to be a little older, I think. But conversely, I know people who read their kids The Hobbit when they were like 2 to 6, and it was just like their book they read all the time. They loved it.
Yeah. My kids were somewhere in the
So
middle with The Hobbit. Like
yeah,
we did read it to them a couple like when they were 6.
yeah. You guys are big
I
Lord of the
did.
Rings people, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we really get into that. It took a few tries. Like there were some sort of false starts and stops,
Mm.
and we'd have to like take a couple nights and read something else, and then we tried again. And like I said, we moved to doing the illustrated edition,
Mm-hmm.
and that helped, and just them kind of getting used to it helped. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember you. So earlier you mentioned voice, but that triggered for me uh, that I do voices. That I think when I read to my kids, and so like yeah, so I do these voices, these goofy voices whenever I'm reading to my kids. Like I'll do voices for all the different characters, uh, and they get super into that. Like
Mm-hmm.
we've been reading the Redwall books,
Oh, nice.
which I think are a really solid,
Yeah.
solid series to get into with your kids. And so we've been doing that, and all of the different animal characters have like different voices. And he was an amazing writer. Brian Jocks was an amazing writer in that he like wrote all of his different characters. Like all of the rabbits had, you know, one way of talking, and then all of the moles had a different way of talking, and then like and they all have these different voices, that are then easy to sort of for the reader who's reading to their kids to like have these fun sort of unique,
Yeah.
and they're all based on other like various British accents, like
Cool.
the
Can
yeah.
you give me a sample maybe of one of your accents? I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Oh,
I'll
you're gonna
do
put
one
me on the
too.
spot. Well, if
You
I
can
had
put
the
me on the
book,
spot back
it'd
if you
be
want.
if I had the book in front of me, it'd be a little easier. But I could do a little bit of mole speech. I could do Roy. Oh, the wee Gibbons has been getting into the or elderberry wine.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. So yeah.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Yeah, the mole speech is fun. That's a fun one to do.
It's
Uh
a good one.
yeah.
You, you know what I love about that, man? Like it gives, you know how like when you got your kid and you're on a hike or something like that, and you only have like a quarter mile to go, and if the kid has nothing to do or if they're bored, it's the longest quarter mile of your life.
Hmm.
But if you make a game out of it, they'll run it.
Yeah,
And it's kind of
absolutely.
the same. Yeah, it's the same with the books, man. Like that Redwall story, it's probably it's whatever, it's a fantasy story, but because it's got the animals, it's the Disney formula.
Yeah.
Just put talking animals in it, and the kids will be like, ah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gets into we talked about kind of what it's for and what it's useful for, and what value it brings, and I don't want to say focus on that like it's only because it's a good value, but I feel really strongly about it because in my own life I like fantasy because it was a way to kind of take a back like a step back from myself and just get my head out of my own head. And for kids, their brains are so able to do that at this age.
Hmm.
They can turn into anything they want.
Yeah.
They have the capacity for that. And if you give something like that to them, yeah, you might be surprised where their brains will go with it. And I'm hard pressed to find negatives about that.
Yeah.
I see empathy building. I see like appreciation for things. I see experiencing emotions. Like there's a lot of things you want to see in your kids like that are brought out with fantasy. But I was wondering, just in terms of benefits and stuff like that, like where have your kids gravitated towards? Do they have specific like interests or things that they're really into that have grown that are maybe different from yours or different from stuff you've or maybe that have surprised you? Mm-hmm.
My kids are a little bit basic in the sense that like my daughter like loves unicorns.
Mm-hmm.
Unicorns, mermaids, like princesses. She's all about
Yeah.
like the girly stuff. And my son is like, I'm a knight and I'm going to slay the dragon. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like they're kind of like
Cool.
they're kind of like they're like the little sort of like I don't know quintessential like boy and girl like they're both in like their fantasy interests and in other ways like they're very much like that like it's almost stereotypical like so that's what I mean by basic, you know what I'm saying, like you
Your
know
kids are basic.
yeah, my wife
No,
likes pumpkin spice lattes and I got
uh, it's okay to be. Yeah, it's okay
it's
to.
okay to
I
be
think.
basic a little bit,
Yeah,
it's all right.
yeah. You don't have to be a wild stallion in everything you do. I would say my kid's basic in the same way, man. Her direction went towards cats.
Mm.
It involves a cat, especially if it's a kitty unicorn.
Oh,
It's like
like a kitty
game
corn.
on.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
from the
kitty corn.
like from the Lego movie, the kitty corn. Yeah,
Oh yeah, that's like your
yeah,
spirit
definitely.
animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice,
Um,
nice.
and of course, she's still in the phase where like poop and pee are really funny. So
I think I'm still in that phase. I don't know.
yeah, it's
I think
always funny. It never
who,
stops.
who isn't in that phase still? Like really? Well, I think I'm done. I think I'm good. I've said my piece, and yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think I'm good too. You got one like main series you'd recommend to people?
And I've mentioned a bunch of stuff already. I think a good place to start, if you got little kids, that need pictures. I think that Unicorns Are the Worst is a great little book, and the series of books that fall after it a great little spot to start. As like my first, it's a very funny series. It's a very goofy series.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick that one up, man. That sounds great. That's the one with the goblin, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then if you're getting to the point where you're like sitting down and starting to read to them, I mean, I think Redwall is a great series for that. There are some little bit more mature themes that I sort of not realized were as mature as they are in some places,
Mm.
but the kids I think have handled that well. And yeah, you just got to be able to stop and explain some things, but it's very funny. There's some very, very funny stuff. I think that book has got a lot of laughs out of them because there's a lot of silliness.
Mm.
Especially the bad guys. The bad guys are, you know, yeah, the bad guys are very silly. They have great PG insults for each other. You got to be careful with that, right? Like you said, they're little sponges, but you just like say, well, look,
Yeah.
they're the bad guys. You don't want to be like that guy, but you don't want to say that to you don't want to say that to your friends. But like
Yeah.
there's a lot in there that's gotten a lot of laughs from the kids.
Cool.
They really enjoy the Redwall series. So
Nice.
um fairy tales are another good spot to start.
And I
So
got a good recommendation for that.
ah, great.
Yeah, it's a book called Endlessly After, and it's a pick your own adventure children's book with wonderful pictures, great art, and the kids get to choose what they do. What they you basically play Little Red Riding Hood, and you start off in your shed, and you get to pick like what do you wear outside. Go to this page. Go to that page.
Very nice. And I
And
used to
there's
love
probably
those when I was a
oh yeah,
kid.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool, man. There's probably 12, 13 different endings, and it's just this big conglomeration of all the different Grimm's fairy tales.
Nice. Very
Yeah,
nice.
and that's endlessly ever after. Um, I love your recommendations. I'm actually going to try a couple of those. I did want to throw in a little bit of sci-fi because it's still fantasy. It's just with robots and stuff. But
Mhm.
um, the Wild Robot is one of my kids' favorite series. Movie just released.
Yeah, we
Um,
actually just saw the movie. I'd never heard of it
oh yeah,
until the movie.
dude, the books are wonderful.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, kids like the movie. It was so
yeah, the books are even better
nice.
as usual.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's pretty normal. Yeah. Yeah.
but it's good. And yeah, like you said, there's a couple more mature themes in there that you might have to provide some guidance on. But
Mhm.
that's a wonderful one that we've had a lot of good nights with. Two more recommendations for one is just a general one to go to the library. There's so
Mhm.
much at the library, so much good stuff.
There really is. We go to the library all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's great because you try it out,
Yeah.
see if it works. Yeah, if you don't like the language, whatever, you just take it back. So it's a great tool.
Yep.
Um, and then the other one, I there are some decent like Disney continuations of the stories and things like that. Some of them are hard to read, but it's another interesting. Like if your kid does like Disney movies, and if you're frustrated that they won't stop watching them or are always asking for them, there are books that will slow them down a little bit, take the brain from crazy blah, 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 to more relaxed and reading a book. And some of
Mhm.
them are decently written and involve their favorite characters. So that's another thing kind of worth maybe looking into. They have bedtime stories, little 5-minute stories. Some of them are good, some of them are awful. So your mileage may vary, but
Yeah.
it's another way to kind of keep it going. And even if it seems lame to you, even if it's the 20th time you've seen Frozen, it's still that's fantasy, man. They're getting into something. Um, if it's Cars, it's still they're still getting out of their heads. So yeah, I just like to encourage everyone to have an open mind with fantasy. It's a really big tent. I guess what I'm trying to say to without gatekeeping it. And yeah,
Yeah. It is a really big tent. It's huge, huge tent. Big variety. Pretty much everybody's welcome. You know,
yep.
it's pretty cool.
Damn straight. Ugh. Well, Gus, I feel pretty good, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening and hope you had a good time and hope you'll join us for the next one. Like and subscribe. I guess. I guess. Signing off. And good night. Done.
That's my favorite one yet. Good.
All right.
When you did that, that means I didn't have to stay gold. So,
But you said it now, so you know.
but this isn't going to be in the show. We're taking this out, right?